This podcast is not sponsored or supported by any business or organization. The views reflected on these podcast episodes are my own. Please be aware I am not a medical expert, travel agent, or any other kind of expert. Hey everyone, welcome to the Eat, Explore, Love podcast. I'm Ashley. This podcast is based off of my blog of the same name, Eat, Explore, Love. It talks about the unique challenges in traveling around the world when you have celiac disease. Due to sort of popular demand, I decided to also record a podcast to delve a little deeper into my travels and the lessons learned along the way. For my next guest during Celiac Disease Awareness Month, I am speaking with Dr. Elenor MacGregor. She was recently diagnosed with celiac herself and is instrumental in helping children finally get a diagnosis and walking them through what it means to have celiac disease. Her expertise is incredibly helpful as she helps me go through my misunderstandings of having celiac. I really hope you enjoy this episode of Eat, Explore, Love, the podcast. Hello, Dr. Ellie. So nice to see you and so lovely to meet you. Welcome to Eat, Explore, Love, the podcast.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here and happy Celiac Awareness Month.
Yes. So, being that it is Celiac Disease Awareness Month, would you mind telling the listeners your story and if perhaps it dovetails into, does it have anything to do with the career that you have today? If you could just first take us through your celiac disease journey, I would love to hear it.
Yeah, I think like most people who are getting diagnosed with any kind of autoimmune disease, it's hard to get diagnosed. And I will tell you that I knew that I had celiac because I am a medical doctor. So if it was hard for me to get diagnosed, you can't imagine
Yeah.
how hard it is to get diagnosed. I heard your story, but yeah. It was tricky. So I have no proof for this, but I am fairly certain my celiac was triggered by COVID.
Okay.
Because 2 weeks after my second of 3 COVID infections that I got while I was working, I was super sick, just like deathly, like just what like spiral downhill. I was like so fatigued. I couldn't get off the couch after work, which is not me. I'm super energetic most of the time. I was like so anxious. I'm like, why am I so anxious? Like nothing. I mean, it was COVID. I was like, well, maybe it's like the COVID stress. I don't know. I'm tired. And then the tummy stuff started. And then I'm like, I have celiac. And I called up my doctor at the time because, it's not the best practice to be your own doctor.
Mhm.
So I do try to see other doctors. Yeah. So I called my doctor. I'm like, I have celiac. I've got these symptoms. And she's like, you have depression.
Oh,
And I was like, yeah. And I was like, I don't think I do.
I
And she's
seem
like, I
pretty
want to,
okay.
yeah. I was like, I don't know. That doesn't really sit right with me. Like I've got these like physical symptoms that are happening. And, she wanted to start an SSRI, that's an antidepressant for anyone that doesn't know. And I was like, maybe I'm crazy. Maybe I do have depression. I don't know, but I don't really want to start an SSRI without blood work. And so I did get her to order just some basic labs. Like I couldn't get her to order the celiac labs or anything like that. But I was like, can you just order like some blood counts?
Yeah.
Come on. So she did. And they came back and I was like super anemic. And I'm like, y'all, I'm anemic because I have celiac.
Yeah.
So, and I think I was so sick and tired that it really didn't even occur to me like, hey, just stop the gluten. Like I think I just needed to have the diagnosis at that time. So, I get a hold of her and she's like, apparently, I guess she was just worried. This was all over messaging, so it was kind of weird.
Okay.
But apparently, she was worried that I had colon cancer. And I was like, I really don't think that I do have colon cancer. And like, I was so glad that I was a medical doctor, or I am a medical doctor, because I was
Right.
like, if someone else had received this news of like possible colon cancer, I mean, that would have been like really alarming. And I was
Exactly.
just like, nope, that's not it, you know.
Yeah.
So at that point, I was like, you know what? We're not aligned. Like, our values are not aligned. She's a great doctor if you're just wanting like super conventional thought pattern, which I'm not really into, and she wasn't really like listening. And I'm like, y'all,
Mhm.
I have got to reach out to my friends. So I'm lucky because I've got, all my friends are doctors, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
so so I'm in a really privileged position. So I just call up my girlfriend. I'm like, hey, listen, I've got celiac. Will you order the test? To be fair, she was kind of like, are you sure? Like,
Yeah.
I don't know. But she was like, fine, we'll just order the
Yeah.
testing. And, you know, so some of you may know, or some of you may not know, that the screening test for celiac is called your tissue transglutaminase IgA antibody. And usually, if you get a doctor to order something, that's what they'll order. I was like, no, no, no. You're going to order my anti-gliadin. You're going to order my anti-endomysial antibodies. You're going to order the IgG. So there's this whole panel that you can do. So she ordered it. I was sky high for all of my antibodies, just like through the roof. I was like, yeah, I've got celiac. So next day I was like, I'm going gluten free because I knew what to do. I knew how to handle it.
Yeah.
Again, I was in a very privileged position because like I know what has gluten and what doesn't because of my training.
Right.
Um, I did schedule with a GI just to talk it through. And she was like, listen, girl, your endomysial antibodies, which for anybody that doesn't know, those are the antibodies that are physically like attacking your intestines and causing like the problem, one of the problems or part of the problem. They're through the roof. Like, you can get a biopsy if you want, but like you need to be like gluten free like yesterday. So the only point of doing the biopsy would be if we were worried that you also had another illness in addition to celiac. And I was like, well, how often does that happen? And she's like, well, I've never seen it. So I'm like, okay, you know what? I'm going to go ahead and go gluten free. And if I don't feel better, I'll give you a ring. And she's like, cool. So then I'm, from there, I'm gluten free. So my story was a little better, you guys, because I knew, like, I knew what to do. And I've diagnosed, so many kids with celiac, pretty young, even like 3 and 4 year olds I've diagnosed. Now, I don't know if that's because patients were coming to me because they knew I had celiac and they weren't being heard. And so I was
Mhm.
just getting a lot of patients with the same symptoms, or, maybe I have more awareness about it because I myself have celiac. But, people do go through the ringer, as you know, going from
Yeah.
doctor to doctor, saying there's something not right and getting blown off. And part of it, I'm hoping this has changed, but to be honest with you, like the training, when I went through training for becoming a medical doctor back in the day, like the training that you get for celiac is like, it's extremely rare. And all children are going to have outrageously horrible GI symptoms,
Mhm.
like diarrhea, blah, blah, blah. And they're all going to be extremely tiny and not growing well at all, like to the point that you're like, shocked. So in your mind, that with this training, you're thinking like it's only this like small subgroup of people.
Yeah.
And I hope that's changing because really the symptoms are much more subtle in most people, right?
Yeah.
And a lot of people don't realize like anxiety. Um, so I'll give you an example. I have a patient that he's college age, never had anxiety. um, Never had like lack of focus issues, never had like inattention issues. And he was diagnosed, I think, with anxiety and ADHD, put on stimulant medication, like amphetamine type medication, and I believe antidepressants.
Mhm.
Felt horrible, kept losing weight because he wasn't doing well. And I tested him. It turns out he has celiac. He didn't need any of that stuff. He
Yeah.
just needed to go gluten free. So the symptoms can be as simple as like anxiety.
Yeah.
Mhm. So that's something that I focus on in my practice. making sure that anyone who's been diagnosed with anxiety, ADHD, depression, anything like that is getting screened fully for nutrient deficiency, celiac, thyroid, all of the things.
Yeah.
And then the specialized testing that I do. Um, that was so much. I'm such a
No.
talker.
No, that was perfect, and I think, it's so important of hearing the more awareness we could bring about every person's celiac disease story and their diagnosis story, the better, and unfortunately, the main overlap seems to be that doctors are just not willing to hear and listen when you're saying, "Hey, I'm not feeling well. I know my body and something's not right." And that they're like, "But no, I know better." But I know that, and
Yeah.
I think it seems the thing that I said in my celiac disease diagnosis story and what you're saying is just unabashedly just advocate for yourself and don't lose that confidence in yourself and knowing that seems to be the message I got from what you were saying of if you know something's up, keep persevering and advocate for yourself appropriately.
Yeah, I mean, not all doctors are like that. Not all doctors are going to blow you off. There are good doctors that will listen. So if you are seeing someone and you're like, that person is not aligned with my value system, they are not listening, they're too busy. Who knows? Maybe they just have a really crazy personal life. They have, their mom is dying of cancer. Who knows? But whatever they're going through, it's not working for you. It's totally fine. Just switch.
Yeah,
Find someone who will listen. Um, I do that work. There's other people that do that work. If you're in North Carolina or you're in California, happy to order celiac testing for you. So if you're worried about that, please reach out. There's plenty of us who will listen. I'm not a GI, so that's the caveat is that there comes a point where we have to make a decision about that,
yeah,
which may or may not be necessary depending on what's going on. But not everyone is that way. So now I will say this. Be aware that if your doctor does not have like a specific thing to point to in their chart note, there's this whole thing in medicine. Okay. So if you are seeing an insurance-based doctor, they have to put these codes on your chart, and those codes correlate to what the insurance company will or will not pay for.
oh,
So if you're not like, hey, I've got these very specific symptoms, right? Like I'm just trying to think like what they would possibly pay for. And I can't guess. By the way, I cannot guess what the insurance company will not accept. I swear to God, it changes.
yeah,
But like, let's say you've got like diarrhea, bloating, gas, and you're losing weight. That might be something the insurance company will pay for, right? But if you go in and you're like, I don't feel well, just order a celiac test, and the doctor can't write a code that's very specific to those symptoms, the insurance company may not pay for the test. So just be aware that would be the one downside, I would say,
yeah,
of getting. So find out what the cash price is, find out if it's in your budget. If you're not feeling well, by all means get the test done. If you're privileged enough to be able to put it on a credit card or, however you want to do it.
yeah.
But that's probably the one downside of getting, tests done that are considered by the insurance company to be unnecessary.
Yeah, that's a really great point that you just raised because my parents and I got into a heated discussion for a test that so at a certain point, the doctors thought how it was described to me was a brain tumor. They thought based on my blood results, they were indicative of either I was making breast milk or I had a brain tumor. And I was not making breast milk. So I was like, I guess I've got a brain tumor. And
Hmm.
I took two tests. The blood work came back, the second one worse than the first one. And then I went to go see I forget the name of the doctor, but she wanted to order. She's like, "All right, we'll order one more test. If this test is fine, we're just going to let it go and, try again next time and see, like, give it a year or whatever." And I said, "Well, I would still like an MRI. If you're telling me that two out of the three tests are like the numbers are off the charts, I still would like an MRI of my brain because I don't want to with my brain, I don't want to leave anything up to chance." And
Yeah, that seems reasonable.
yeah, and she, told me that because the 3rd test came back and the number was normal, she said, "Well, I'm not gonna write it up where insurance covers it." And I said to my parents, "What do I do? Because I can't afford this scan, but I would like this scan." And it became like a whole escalation of my parents not understanding why won't insurance just cover it. And I think that description that you just gave of there needs to be certain codes to make sure that insurance does
Mhm.
cover it is really informative and helpful for people, again, in knowing how to advocate for themselves appropriately. So thank you for sharing that and and proving me right and validating me for that situation I went through. So thank you.
You're welcome. Yes, and I wish I had all the answers. I don't operate in the insurance system, and this is why, because
Yeah.
I can't do the tests that I know are necessary for my patients,
Yeah.
um, and guarantee that they will be paid for by the insurance company because most likely they won't, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I just wanted to ask you, being that you are a medical professional and with celiac disease, you mentioned that you feel that it got triggered by COVID. And I know that in my my diagnosis story episode, I talked about that. I know that people get markers, and sometimes it's like something like puberty, or like my sister was a gymnast and had like heavy physical training on her body. They feel like that triggered the celiac becoming active, I guess. Is that
Mhm.
myth, or is that something that is like someone could just have the markers and then something triggers it to become active? Or are you born with celiac and if you have it, you have it. If you don't, you don't? What does that all
Yeah.
mean?
Yeah, that is a great question. And this actually goes to something called epigenetics. So, back in the day, when they first kind of discovered DNA and your genes and everything, they were like, okay, you've got the gene, so you either have it or you don't have it, whatever it is. Celiac, I don't know. I'm trying to think off the top of my head, like PKU, like just any random disease. That is not turning out to be true.
Okay.
So now what we're realizing is your genes are actually influenced by your environment.
Okay.
And, when I say environment, I'm not necessarily talking about just like air pollution or things like that, although that does come into play. But we're talking about all kinds of things. So, like your stressful life, your ability to exercise, your nutritional intake, other diseases, toxins. There's a whole host of things that can trigger or methylate, which is the medical word for it, your DNA, which can turn a gene on, I think, or off. I'm not a geneticist, but that's how I understand it. And I don't know of any specific research at this point that says, hey, Ellie, your COVID was the cause of your celiac.
Right.
So I just want to be clear. I don't know of any scientific literature at this point. I just happened to notice that that's when I got sick. So I was like, that has to be it. I was so inflamed. And I actually developed another inflammatory disorder in my eye called uveitis at the same time. And we do know that COVID is inflammatory, right? That causes a lot of the issues that people have with long COVID is like prolonged inflammation. Um, and then, within my patient population, within the patients that I was taking care of, I just sort of noticed an uptick. Now, it might have just been that I was looking for it,
Yeah.
right? Because I'm like, oh, my COVID brought it on, So that's a bias that I have.
Yeah.
But we do know from many other genes that your body is influenced. It's like those aging genes, right? The ones that have the long or short telomeres you hear all about in the news. All of that is influenced by how we live our lives, and that's where functional integrative medicine comes into play really, really well because we're focused on all of these influences around us that help promote longevity and health, right? So that's
Yeah.
kind of the difference. Whereas in conventional medicine, there's not a focus on these outside factors. Yeah.
So I'm one of four. Three out of the four of us are officially diagnosed with celiac disease. Our youngest sister has the markers, but it's not showing active at all. And my mother, I believe, also has the markers. So it's all her fault that we all have the celiac. But if someone just has the markers, is your recommendation that they just go and live their life and not worry about eating gluten free, but to keep an eye on it that they could end up having celiac disease officially at one point in time? Or the markers just say, you've got the genes. If you have children, you could pass it on to your children. Just keep an eye out in that regard.
Hmm. Yeah. Okay. So in conventional medicine, again, conventional medicine is focused on disease states
Mm-hmm.
and treating a disease state. So I'll give you an example. You go to your doctor with anxiety. I've got anxiety. They're like, great, I'm diagnosing you with anxiety. Okay, so it seems a little circular, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the treatment for anxiety is an antidepressant. Here you go. Done. Dunsies. So that's kind of where it ends. Name the illness, treat the illness. In functional integrative medicine, we're like, okay, you're anxious. Why do you have anxiety?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, you would think that that would be the logical next step. Not always, right? So, that's, okay, do you have a nutritional deficiency? Do you have brain hormones that are depleted because you're not getting enough of a certain amino acid, a certain nutrient in your body? Are you ingesting toxins unknowingly, like, in children, lead? We have to think about lead. I don't know if you remember all of that crazy water up in Detroit when they had, lead in their water, like that can be a reason. You have a thyroid illness that no one has checked for. So there's all these underlying possible reasons that you're anxious, right? Yes, of course, we can't ignore psychological stresses. That's why we have therapists, right?
Right.
Therapists are our friends. We love them. There's other things that we're, wanting support for as well, but we have to look for those underlying causes. So, here's what I have to say from a functional medicine perspective with gluten. There is a percentage of the population that will feel better if they're not on gluten.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Does everyone in the entire world need to be gluten free? Probably not. But if you have symptoms because of your gluten intake, like brain fog, I'm thinking about my world, anxiety, upset tummy, you're getting symptoms, go ahead and stop it. There's plenty of other ways to eat in this world than, ingesting gluten. Um, if you're totally fine and you're like, hey, I've got these genes, but I feel amazing, I mean, maybe just watch that. Do a test every couple of years and make sure you're not flagging antibodies. I don't think there's necessarily a reason to change. Now, in the conventional medical world, they're most likely going to say, you're fine. If you start getting symptoms, then I guess we'll figure it out. But, in the functional world, we're looking at how do you feel? So it's not necessarily, I'm not treating the test, I'm treating the patient.
Okay.
Okay. So I hope that makes sense.
Yeah. So if, there are people that have the markers, but not necessarily celiac disease, if they're feeling fine, keep going on with your life. If they're not feeling great, try eating gluten free and see if that helps. Is that essentially
100%.
the
And if that doesn't help, find a functional medicine doctor, like I'm here. If you're like, I went gluten free and I don't feel better, I'm still anxious and depressed, or I can't focus and I've got brain fog, whatever it may be, my gut is a hot mess, like reach out, like I'm here in North Carolina. If you are in California, I see patients all over California. Find someone that can help you.
Mhm.
Don't go it alone. A lot of people do try to go it alone, I think, because of negative experiences with the medical system, which I completely understand. Many people have valid reasons for that. Um, but it can be exhausting, like trying to spend your time on Google and reading like the Reddit forums, and you're like, is this even real? Like, I don't even know who these people are or what they're saying. Is it true? I don't know. It's
Yeah.
exhausting.
Yeah.
So find someone. There are people that will help. I promise.
Yeah.
It may take some research. Yeah.
Yeah, I found it took, I think, like 5 doctors for me to finally find the one that, like, I had a good rapport with, and I could come in with my list of questions, and that she was very patient and nice and willing to
Yes.
explore. And she, I guess, to your point, which I think is a really good way for me to go into a doctor appointment. Are they treating me for the test? Are they treating me and how I feel? I think that's a really great perspective and mentality for me to be as a patient to go and ask of the doctor when I'm talking to them and discussing. So thank you for that perspective. That's super
Yeah.
helpful.
Yeah.
Um,
100%.
so if you were just diagnosed with celiac disease, then it clearly didn't come into play of you choosing your profession. So what made you want, how did you get here in your career path of maybe not going the conventional medicine route, but going the functional medicine route? And that being your mentality and perspective as you treat patients.
Yeah, I've always been a little bit more holistic and patient-minded and patient-centered. I'm actually an osteopath, which is a type of medical doctor that focuses a little bit more on the whole body. I'm 100% virtual, but some osteopaths also do a little bit of body work as well. So there are other things that come into play. We're not acupuncturists, but we learn a little bit about like what is acupuncture, so there's a little bit. I wouldn't say that it's like an extreme, overwhelming, like every osteopath is going to be extremely holistic type situation, but there's more of a tendency for that with that particular training than an MD versus a DO. So I'm a DO, which means I have all the same training as an MD, but just kind of this extra part. So I did that. And, at that time of my life, I really didn't know what a naturopath was. I didn't know what functional medicine was. I had never heard of, I was in a small town in the Midwest at this time, and I had never even heard of like craniosacral or like herbology. So I really thought this was, the only option. And I wanted to be a healer.
Mm.
So I picked the most holistic healing tradition that I knew of, which was osteopathy. There's a couple colleges in the Midwest, which is why I knew. And I did that. And then I practiced, right? I went out and practiced. I joined a practice. And I was like, oh no, this is not what I was expecting. I did not know that the insurance company was going to require me to see a patient every 15 minutes. And
Wow.
yeah, yeah, I did not know that I barely had time to listen to people's concerns and possibly order a test, and that is what was driving this system of medicine, was this payment system. Um and I really kind of got to the point where I was like, I don't think my value systems are aligned with this. And my patients were asking me questions. They knew I was open minded. And I was like, you guys, I don't know. Like, I want to be able to advise you on herbs, I want to be able to advise you on supplements, but I just wasn't trained. Right.
Right.
And I didn't want to tell anything, anybody anything I didn't know. So I just said, I don't know. Now, some doctors are uncomfortable saying, I don't know. Right.
Yeah.
So that's where you get this. Not all doctors. I don't want to say all doctors, but sometimes you get this like, well, that's harmful, just don't do it,
Mhm.
right? And sometimes that's just an indication that people just don't know and they don't want to cause harm and they're embarrassed to say, and so then they just say it's harmful, don't do it. So that's a tip too when advocating for yourself, ask the right person.
Right.
An acupuncturist um, hopefully knows the we call it contraindications, but like the reasons that you would not want to get acupuncture. Like I'm trying to think of a good reason. Like let's say you have a bleeding disorder, like a
Mhm.
severe bleeding disorder. I don't know. I'm not an acupuncturist, but that to me, maybe we want to think about acupressure, right?
Yeah.
So ask the right person the right questions. And anyway, so I decided, you know what, I'm going to go and get my integrative medicine fellowship training, which is a 2-year training in integrative medicine in 2017. And that started the ball rolling. And I'm like, all right, I'm here for this. This is me. This is what I'm about. And the training just continued. And I was trained in integrative and in functional medicine, which those are actually different things. Not everybody knows that because I think the words are conflated, they're mixed up a lot. But functional medicine specifically is looking for a root cause, looking at the biochemistry in the body. And integrative medicine is integrating all of the healing modalities. So, for example, how can we bring in these, external healers into your treatment plan? So, like, let's say you're doing some conventional treatment, you're seeing your GI, but you're still having some cramping and tummy pain. You also want to go see your acupuncturist, and maybe you're going to go see the herbalist. So
Mm.
that's kind of more integrative. So it's like a braid. We're braiding all of the different modalities together, the different types of training. And then functional is like, what is the root cause? So there's a little different. I'm trained in both. So that's kind of fun.
Yes.
And I just kind of kept going. And then in 2020, as we know, COVID hit.
Mhm.
And I was working for a company that was pretty okay with my integrative ways. But there were still a lot of limitations on the way that I could practice and the way that I wanted to practice. And kids were suffering, kids and teens. Like, pre-COVID, my mental health practice was 10 or 15% of what I was doing. during and after COVID, it was probably 40-50% of the kids that I was seeing was anxiety, depression, lack of focus, all kinds of things. And I knew that I had these treatment methods in my back pocket, but I couldn't use them. I couldn't order any advanced diagnostic tests. And it was so frustrating. And I knew I could help. And I just thought, I'm being called to open this practice and I just need to go do it. And so that's what I did. And now I'm in North Carolina where my family lives, but I still practice all over California as well because I'm licensed there. And that's what I do. I see patients virtually. Everyone has to have their own primary care doctor to see me virtually. So just FYI on that.
Yeah.
And, we talk through all of the things. We talk through what are the symptoms, what's going on. And then we break it down like what testing do we need or not need, what nutrition, what environmental changes, are there toxins, are there stress management techniques that are needed, how's the social life, how's the spiritual life.
Yeah.
I don't have a agenda when it comes to
Yeah.
people's spiritual life. But I'll give you an example. I had a patient recently that was telling me she was so sad because they had moved away from their community and they were very involved in their church, right? And she just missed her church community so much. And this is why she was so sad. And she's telling me this. And then she's like, oh, but we'll get to the medicine part later. And I'm like, no, this is the medicine part.
Yeah. Yeah.
This is part of it, y'all. So, it's all of those things combined, right? And that's a process. So it's slow medicine. You're not going to get, this is not, here's your 15-minute appointment, here's your copay, and here's your pill. That is not functional integrated medicine. No, no, no. This is slow cooker medicine. We're unraveling people's physiology, and that takes time. And we're doing a lot of lifestyle changes and in most cases, people are needing supplementation until we can get some of that stuff on track. That being said, the intention is not for your supplements to become your permanent, and it's also not the intention to be on 45 different supplements. That's not appropriate. Hey, and on that's one of the biggest mistakes that I myself made, and also I've seen patients make too, is going on Google. What supplement is good for ADHD?
Yeah.
What supplement's good for anxiety? And then, people suggest all kinds of things and they may or may not be good. Like generally, most people with anxiety, yeah, taking magnesium is good. If your child's not specifically deficient in magnesium because you didn't do any testing,
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know, might help. Maybe, depends what's going on, right? So I would highly recommend, before wasting your money on thousands of dollars worth of supplements, go get the testing done. It's not super cheap, but when you think about how much you're probably likely spending on, other doctor visits, other supplements, other practitioners,
Yeah.
it's most likely going to actually save you money in the long run because you're going to know what your specific, self or child needs, depending on, who needs the help.
So I feel because do you specialize in working with children? Is that what your specialty is?
Yeah, so I'm a pediatrician and I see kids from 2 years old until college age most of the time. However, I definitely have worked with parents because what happens is they come to me for kiddos and then they're like, you know what? I've actually also got these issues. Do you mind just taking a look?
Yeah.
I'm not a primary care. I can't be a primary care, adult doctor, but I can definitely be a functional medicine consultant for adults. So if that is what you're needing, you've got some of these symptoms, definitely reach out.
So if you have, and we're just going to use celiac as an example, because I wasn't diagnosed until I was 15, and then my sister was diagnosed at 11, and my brother at 14. So I feel like when you're getting something that at that time too with celiac, there wasn't what there is now, all the options. It was a complete
Hmm.
life change, and it led to a can of worms being opened for all three of us, but mainly my sister and myself, because my brother was autistic. He just had his regimen and then he could go on his way. He really wasn't bothered by it. But for my sister and I, the way it impacted us socially, as well as adjusting to a whole new way of thinking and a whole new life of, it really does consume your everyday life of when you go out anywhere, you have to be thinking about, or I have to be thinking about, I should say, having celiac and making sure I'm super duper careful. when you have a diagnosis for a child that really changes their life, in whether it's they have cancer or it's celiac, which it's not equivalent. I'm saying that's the range of it. Could be as easy, quote unquote, as having celiac or difficult as something more severe like cancer. How do you help wrap your patients' heads around their diagnosis, especially when they're children? And I'm sure it might even be more difficult for the parents in some instances as well. How do you help them navigate that you do that full picture with when you're working with them?
Yeah, it's a challenge, and I would say that it's an ongoing process. I most people are not, you know, able to both process in the moment the diagnosis and make a whole host of life changes that day,
Yeah.
right? Like that is a huge challenge. And not only that, there's a learning curve. To answer your question, it depends on the age of the child. In my 3-year-olds, it's a very different conversation than the 17-year-old,
Yeah.
So with a 3-year-old, it's the family most of the time that we're chatting with. And by the way, this changes over the course of time because kids get older, right?
Yeah.
So, at 3, the parents have a lot more influence on what their kiddo is eating. And they're able to, hopefully, depending on their advantages in life or privilege in life, are able to advocate for their child and make changes. Becomes more difficult with people with low socioeconomic. Some of the gluten free foods cost quite a bit more. Okay.
Hmm.
So there can be um, some issues there as well. So we have to be mindful of that. I actually think that's a problem. I believe, nobody quote me on this because I haven't looked it up and researched it, but somebody told me that there's a stipend in Italy for people that have
There is.
celiac. Okay, good.
Yep.
And I'm like, oh, we need that, especially for people that do not have the resources, because there is a psychological impact. If you go to a birthday party and everyone's having pizza, what do you do?
Yeah.
Right? What do you do? If you have resources, you might buy that gluten-free pizza and bring it. If you don't have resources, what do you do?
Yes.
So with the younger families, with kids with the younger kids, we'll talk. I talk with parents. I explain what the disease is, and we usually let that marinate, right? Think about it, see how you feel, process the feelings. Some people do need therapists to talk it through
Mhm.
because it's so life changing. And some people need support groups. So there's a lot of support groups out there, like Chad. I don't know if you're familiar with them, but they're in a support group for kids with ADHD, and they help for kids that have so like if you have a kid that has ADHD and celiac, for example, or if you have anxiety and celiac, and there's celiac specific support groups as well. So sometimes that's really helpful. um, then after we've had a time to marinate, I will schedule a follow-up because inevitably questions come. um, Most of the time a nutritionist is involved as well, because that's really helpful to have their extra support, meal planning, pantry openings, all of that. I have done some of that work as well, where we just say, you know what, over Zoom, let's open up this pantry. Let's see what we're looking at, what we're dealing with, and what are some of the subs to do. And then most often I find myself answering questions around contamination problems,
Mhm.
how to avoid checking is the fryer gluten free? Is it prepared in a certain way? People, it's hard to think of those things when you're first diagnosed, right? I remember thinking, oh, I've got to change my toaster.
Yeah.
Hello, like my toaster is contaminated and my cutting boards are contaminated, right?
Yeah.
And so that's not always, 100% apparent. Now, teenagers have a lot more control in what they eat. And there's a lot of pressure to fit in. So sometimes the way that I approach that is, you can eat whatever you want, but there may be side effects that you need to be aware of. And this is what they are. And some kiddos do kind of get it. And they're like, okay, I didn't feel well after I ate that big pizza with my friends. I've got to figure something else out. And some don't, and they need extra support with a therapist. So it does change things. Now, I'm lucky because I was diagnosed later in life, and there's so many more gluten-free options. I will say, for me though, one of my biggest challenges when I eat out is the fake gluten-free option. the "this is gluten-free but" option.
Yeah.
And I really have to dive into patients about that. Um, Other diagnoses like cancer, that's a different story depending on the prognosis of the patient, right?
Yeah.
So that may involve a lot more grieving. Um, so that's a different thing that I don't know that that really applies to this particular conversation,
Yeah.
depending on what that prognosis is. But celiac is a process. It's a process over time. It's a process of the initial meeting, the process of 5 years from now when people are more savvy, and the process that develops with the development of the child as well. So different stages.
Yeah, my sister's friend got diagnosed at 15, so within the last 2 years. And my mother put me in front of this kid and said, "Give the advice you wish you had when you were 15 and you were just diagnosed." And I didn't have the most positive things to say, but it was mainly, I was like, "You have to remember it's a marathon, not a sprint. This is it for the rest of your life, and you have to pace yourself." And I said, "You have to allow yourself feeling crummy about it when it comes up, because it does stink. Like, there's no fun part about having to eat gluten free." And then my mom was like, "Okay, I'm taking you away from the child now because you're not being as positive." I was like, "Well, if you're telling me what I wish I knew at 15, I wish I knew it wasn't going to get better all in one shot right away overnight. Like, I thought that it would all be fine, and it wasn't fine." So,
No,
yeah, it's a
no. And your
marathon.
story was more extensive. It
Yeah,
wasn't even just celiac and, a year later your gut's repaired, which is enough of a process.
yeah,
Like your story is so intense. Yeah. I think that is great advice. I mean, and the other advice too is like mistakes happen.
yeah,
I've made mistakes. I've
yeah.
been, when I very first got diagnosed, I went to this food truck that was supposedly a gluten-free food truck. Now you would think like, hello,
Yes,
right?
yeah,
Like, of course it's not gluten-free. But I was just kind of hungry and I'm like, yeah, I'm sure
yeah,
it's fine. Like they're telling me it's gluten-free, whatever. I was so sick the next day. I had such bad joint pain. I could not get off my couch.
yeah,
Um, so mistakes happen and at least I had a lot of judgment around that for myself. I was like, I should know better. And then I realized, you know what? I'm human too, and we have to have compassion for those quote unquote mistakes because
yeah,
they happen. They do happen. And parents as well sometimes will be, so hard on themselves. They're trying so hard and, something happens and it's like, okay, that happened. Let's just, move on.
yeah,
Like who knows? Like their kid stole a Ritz cracker out of their friend's lunchbox, and it's like, okay. Now, having said that, there's pretty cool stuff now. There's gluten-free dogs, like service dogs, which I think should be
mm,
available to everyone.
yeah,
And those really provide, if you have the privilege to get one, I highly recommend it because um, the service dogs, really help with kids' psychosocial development too, because it invites people into their world, right?
yeah,
So normally, what happens when you have this kind of disability is you're segregated, you're separated from the group, right?
yeah,
Because your food is separate, so then you're separate, and parents are trying to not contaminate, and so that can cause a lot of psychological issues. But if you have this dog, all of a sudden the other kiddos are like, "Hey, what's your cute dog doing?"
yeah. That's
So
a
now that
really great point. Yeah,
yeah, so now they're in. And I know there's some testing devices. I personally haven't found those to be particularly convenient or useful, but I know some of my patients do. So those are available as well.
yeah. I've just learned, and I wanted to actually ask you with nutritionists, because I've actually had very poor experience with nutritionists that I've gone to in the past. And part of it is I've learned at restaurants and when I'm dealing with any type of professional, even if this is what they do day in and day out is nutrition. Celiac is a very particular type of thing that most people seem, the average person doesn't seem to know. And for example, I'll have to educate people on like licorice. The licorice itself is fine, but in order for the licorice to not stick to the wrapper, they coat everything in flour. So you can't have licorice because of their coating it in flour. And when I tell a nutritionist that, they're shocked. And then they are like,
Hmm.
"Well, then I really don't know how to help you if that's how intense it needs to be." So are there any good questions that patients can go to with a doctor, nutritionist, restaurant, what have you, with celiac, to be like, "Okay, these are good, easy ways to know to be safe, that you'll be safe here and in good hands or not." Or even if people think they know, there's always a way to make a
Hmm.
mistake and you have to kind of relax a little bit.
So I think your question might be, if I'm getting it right, there's two parts to the question. One is how do you find a nutritionist, and two, how can you feel safer at a restaurant? Is that right?
Well, it's
Or
how to
was it a
feel
bit?
safe with any professional, like, because when I go to a nutritionist, have found 3 out of the 4 that I've gone to don't understand celiac and what it means for me to be gluten-free, as opposed to
Got
someone
it.
that's gluten intolerant. So there are any things that when we're going to these different establishments that we could figure out if we're with someone that does understand celiac.
Yeah, yeah, got it. Well, one, I would recommend looking for a functional nutritionist because they're much more aware
Mhm.
of food allergies. Two, ask the doctor or nutritionist if they have celiac. If they don't, it doesn't necessarily mean they're bad. If they do, great,
Yeah,
right? Because they get it. If they don't, how many patients in your practice have celiac?
yeah.
Okay. If they've seen two people in the last 10 years, that's probably not the nutritionist for you.
Mhm.
And third, find out if there's a nutritionist that is their specific specialty.
Mhm.
You know, doctor and nutritionist. Is this your specialty? Do you specialize in celiac or eating food allergies? Right. If their specialty is um, I'm just trying, I'm, off the cuff, like anorexia, like eating disorders.
Mhm.
That's maybe not who you want to see. So find out, what is their specific niche, how many patients they see with that disorder, and if they do or do not have celiac themselves. I think that is a way to see if you're in good hands. And then last, make sure that you vibe. So is this someone you have a good rapport with? You feel comfy talking to, you don't feel weird saying like, hey, I had this stomach issue and I was in the bathroom for an hour, So you have to feel comfy talking about those like symptoms that are embarrassing, right?
Yeah, yeah,
And if you don't, you're like, oh my God, this person is like, very uptight or like, whatever it may
yeah.
be, maybe move on. And if at any point during your treatment aren't vibing, you feel like it's not a good fit, move on. Like you definitely as a patient can do that. It's a little harder when you live in a rural area, um, which is one reason I'm telehealth. But
Yeah.
you can find people that do virtual appointments, right? You don't have to stick with someone that's not working.
That's really helpful and great advice. Thank you so much. I just want to be aware of our time. I don't want to, I know that you have patients to see and much more important things to do than to
Yes.
chat with me. But to your point about the last point I want to make, and then I do a rapid fire at the end of every episode. But you were mentioning resources for people, and I do want to say look out for your local food drives and make sure you're donating gluten free food as well as like quote unquote regular food. And Boston Children's Hospital is a great resource of good gluten free foods to donate to your local food drive. So, something that people don't know, but figured I would share that information. Uh,
Love it. Love that. So good.
yeah, I didn't think about it until my sister and I go on these celiac cruises now. And that was one of their recommendations. So, something I never thought about, but is to your point that you brought up, it's expensive to be gluten free. So,
It's expensive. It's so expensive. It's like even those sun-dried tomatoes that you thought were gluten-free,
yeah.
they might not be.
Yeah.
So check that label. That was a mistake I made.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. All right, so I just want to move us on to the rapid fire, if that's okay with you. Not related
Yeah.
to what we've been talking about at all, but what is your favorite food city that you visited?
Oh, Paris.
Oh, really? Interesting. Uh,
Yes.
do you prefer a vacation that requires you to be active or relax?
Oh, I love to be active. I mean, I do like my downtime, like in the evenings,
Yeah.
but if I can just walk around a city all day or go kayaking or hiking, I mean, I love that. That is so much fun.
And then what is the city that you learned the most about yourself?
Ooh, city. I would say it wasn't a city.
Yes.
I would s Yeah, I was in I'm gonna butcher my French. It's called Calanque?
Okay.
Calanque? If there is anyone who speaks French, I'm so sorry for the way that I just said that, but there's, like, a national park, and it's so beautiful. It's overlooking the Mediterranean and south of France, and you can hike through all the mountains there. And I did that, and it was just so inspiring and eye-opening and awe-inspiring. And you just learn to sit with yourself through that, hiking.
Yeah.
And you learn a lot through that introspection.
Yeah, for sure. And I know that you have your own practice and all the fun stuff. Where are ways that people can find you?
Yes. So I am middle path. So just like it sounds, middle and then path, integrative
Okay.
pediatrics.com. So middle path, integrative pediatrics.com. If you search for Dr. Ellie MacGregor in Asheville, North Carolina, you will most likely find me. I pop right up. And all of my information is on there. And for those of you who are worried about anxiety, ADHD, depression with celiac or gluten intolerance or other food allergies, I have a guide. It is all over my website. It's 20 pages long. There's no fluff. It tells you how to treat your gut. I promise you.
Yeah,
So snag that, and it really will help your brain health.
that's amazing.
So look me up.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Dr. Ellie. It was so lovely meeting you. And I feel like we need to make this an annual thing where I ask you about the myths of celiac disease and you just correct me. But thank you for all that you do and taking care of as many of us as possible, children and adults alike, and really appreciate all that you do. So thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.
I hope you found this episode incredibly informative and helpful. Dr. Ellie is amazing and spectacular, and I found her to be a tremendous resource for me, even though I'm 15 years into being gluten-free and having celiac disease. The link that she talked about to find Dr. Ellie is in the show notes. If there's anything else I could do, any other questions I can answer, please feel free to reach out at hieatexplorelove@gmail.com. Thanks so much. Till next time. Thank you for joining me this week for all the fun journeys and lessons learned on my big adventure called life. For more information on the different cities discussed, check out the blog posts on hieatexplorelove.com, posted every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. If you have any questions or fun stories to share, feel free to reach out at hieatexplorelove@gmail.com. Until next week, remember to eat well, explore the world, and love yourself. See you next time. This episode is produced, scripted, and edited by me, Ashley. Special thanks to Sarah Mientka.